foremost, I would like to offer a sincere gratitude to all the judges and also the guests in attendance as well. So, I have been given the authority to actually elaborate on the topic of whether resources should be implemented to prevent climate change rather than to prevent it. Now, the climate is very nice today, right? So, of course, what is actually changing, or what is actually changing the climate? Is it us? Is it many countries? Or is it people? Or is it things, other things? Now, let me draw your attention to one specific report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It is stated that 95% of current climate change actually comes from human activities, and 60% comes from the use of our resources. So, against this backdrop, and personally, I would like to address my disagreements to the motion which states that resources should be implemented in order to prevent climate change. But before I provide a disagreement, I would like to define the word resources and also climate change. Now, resources are the materials that we use to meet the demands of people, and climate change is the changing patterns of the climate. So basically, resources actually contribute to climate change. And how? How can actually resources contribute to climate change? Now, first, we must bear in mind that climate change cannot be prevented. Climate change, the pace of climate change keeps increasing from time to time, and we must reduce that tension. We cannot prevent it. And if we take any approaches using resources, implementing technology, many other things to prevent climate change, but we will never prevent it because we will actually contribute partially to climate change. Now let me raise one thing as an example. Around the countries all around the world, there has been the inventions of dams, electromagnetic dams, or electricity dams, hydroelectricity dams. But the creation of those dams requires the destruction of forests. The generation of electricity in those dams requires the applications of electromagnetism, and electromagnetism requires extractions of minerals and resources. But there are also many other technologies in which we actually damaging the environment just because we are actually using it. So we must bear in mind that climate change cannot be prevented. My second argument to this disagreement is that we have universally agreed all around the world that we must take actions into limiting our usage of resources to reduce the pace of climate change. But why are we using the resources again when we have already agreed to reduce it? Now let me raise an example. In the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, there was an agreement which states that the United Arab States, they have all agreed that they will limit the use of their oil in order to stop climate change. And China has also agreed that they will limit the CO2 emission to only 25% by stop industrializing, by stop using the materials in the countries, and also by stop manufacturing products for their monumental population. So, in short, every country all around the world, they have universally agreed, keyword, universally agreed that we must take actions in order to reduce the tensions of climate change. And those actions itself must be taken by us, must be implemented by us, and we must not take any actions that could actually increase the tensions of climate change all around the world. Now, coming up to my last argument, this is the last one. If we use resources to actually adapt to climate change, it will increase the demand of resources in many countries all around the world. In fact, and the demand for resources will require countries to extract their resources from their lands, from their homeland, so that they have this preserved resources for people to buy and also for people to actually invest into their resources. And that contributes partially to climate change. So, in conclusion, we must not use resources to prevent climate change around the world. Because of one, we cannot prevent climate change. Two, we have universally agreed that we will reduce the tension of climate change. And three, it could increase the demand for resources, so we should not do this. And please bear in mind a quote by Kofi Annan, the United Nations Secretary General, the previous one. He stated that our spiritual order that we inhabit these days is changing drastically. But please bear in mind that changes could not be stopped. The pace of changes could be slowed down. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentations. Now I would like to give the floor to our authorities to ask the questions.
So if we don't try to prevent climate change, then many regions will be destroyed by rising seawater and flooding, and that will be uninhabitable. So I see two ways of safer nations that they can adapt. One, they can invite millions of people to migrate into their country, or two, they can build stronger walls to stop people from the destroyed nations coming to their land. So which one would you choose to adapt?
So the first one is that they must prevent migration. Right.
Well, I'm saying if a country, for example, Bangladesh, becomes uninhabitable, you've got more than 100 million people, they can't live there because of the climate change. So do you recommend other nations to invite those 100 million people to come and live in their country? Or do you recommend other nations build stronger barriers to stop those people coming into their country?
Thank you. That is a very complicated question. But I would like to address my answer to this question. Personally, I believe that we should actually stop those people from moving into the country. But we should, I think stopping is very strong, but we should derogate, we should provide limitations for people to move in their countries. Because the people move in their countries, they will start using the resources again. And when they use it, the usage of resources could, like I addressed earlier, could not actually reduce the tension of climate change. So I think that it is still a controversial approach, but I believe that that is the best approach.
I really want to ask you to distinguish whether if there is any differences between the weather change and the climate change.
Okay. Thank you. So, scientifically, climate change and weather changes are actually the same. It's actually the same. So, climate change is the change in the temperature of the world, it's change in the weather patterns of the world, and also it's the change in the the environment of the atmospheres around us. So, there's actually no difference between weather changes and climate change. But weather is part of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Judges and Daravuth. Now I will invite the next candidate, whose name is Long Chan. She is the representative of